February 1996. Missile fire erupts in the Taiwan Strait. American forces are drawn in. The crisis stops short of actual combat.
Taiwan's tragedy is China is too close.
Taiwan, one of the world's most enduring hotspots, where the violent conflicts of our century still reverberate.
Taiwanese people have been always the victim. If one country won the war, Taiwan was given always to the victorious country as a prize.
Pushed by great power rivalries, pulled by the forces of nationalism and democracy, the tug of war over Taiwan poses a continuing threat. For Taiwan, for China, for America, and for world peace.
Funding for this program is provided by the Chang Yong-fa Foundation, part of the Evergreen Group, the Yuan Feng Yu Group, Mercuries and Associates, Shing Kong Life Insurance Company Limited, Taiwan Cement Corporation, Tuntex Group, the Freeman Foundation, Formosa Plastics Corporation, USA, the United States Institute of Peace, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and PBS viewers like you.
Taiwan's story begins with geography. This is a small island off the coast of China. For all their history, people here have struggled to maintain an identity. Too near to China to be different, too far away to be the same. The 90 miles of ocean between Taiwan and China were a long, dangerous journey when the first Chinese came.
Lin
Munyang was a girl from a coastal province of China. One day, her father and older brother went out to sea and met with disaster.
The Chinese brought with them their traditions and beliefs, including the legend of Matsu, who would guide them through the hardships of their new lives.
The girl invoked the goddess of mercy and tried to rescue them. Later, she attained enlightenment and became the goddess Matsu, who helps fishermen in danger. In Taiwan, we say sailors live in constant peril.
Why they have to take this big risk to cross? Not to expand the Chinese territory, not to expand the Chinese sovereignty. They want to escape the misery of life in China.
The immigrants became part of the earliest tug of war over Taiwan. The Chinese emperor had claimed the island for China, but it was so very far away, on the edges of a vast and disunited empire, that it was often forgotten. The people who came to Taiwan were Chinese, culturally and racially. But they felt little connection to the distant emperor, and they fought off attempts to tie them closer to the mainland.
The Chinese thought Taiwan was very difficult to govern. They said Taiwan produced a small rebellion every 3 years, a big one every 5.
In 1895, abruptly, Taiwan's link to China was severed. China lost a war with Japan and was forced to cede its island province. The people of Taiwan found themselves under new rulers.
Japanese were very cruel. It was an authoritarian system and very strict. But in general, the Japanese officials were incorruptible and effective. By the middle of the Japanese occupation, the Taiwanese had been trained into being law-abiding people.
Under the Japanese, everything was policed and regulated. What language people could speak, what crops they could plant, what jobs they could hold.
Every morning, we had to listen to the radio and do exercises. 1, 2, 3. Everybody exercised. And we did not even lock our doors at night. There was no crime.
Most farmers didn't have their own land. They rented land from the owners, and the rents were high. At that time, life was very tough. If you could have fat from a pig once a month, even once a month, you'd feel life was good.
On the mainland, these same years were a time of turmoil. The Chinese emperor was overthrown. Sun Yat-sen established the new Republic of China. His successor, Chiang Kai-shek, fought to unify the country and against the rival Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. China's tumultuous history meant almost nothing to most Taiwanese.
I would say Taiwanese are not too concerned, too interested in what's going on between nationalists and communists. They know what's happening, but still they think this is a foreign country.
Then, in 1937, Japan invaded China. The people of Taiwan felt a new connection with the mainland.
We sympathize with China. We know this is a pure aggressive war. So we are angry at Japan. That is very conflicting feeling. In Taiwan, we are forced to celebrate Japanese victories. So every time Japanese took big cities in China, the students have a parade and celebrate, shouting slogan for Japanese victory. You know, this is very conflicting.
Japan began pushing the Taiwanese to assimilate, to take Japanese names and be more Japanese. 200,000 Taiwanese were drafted into the Japanese army. 40,000 would die for Japan. The pressure reached across all levels of Taiwanese society.
They didn't allow Taiwanese puppet performances in the Japanese era. Performances were very rare. The Japanese just didn't allow them. I had seen them when I was young, but then it was prohibited.
There has been a full 1,000 years of puppet history. Our art is tied to the fortune of our country. If the country is strong, the show flourishes. This is sword fighting. During that time, I felt Taiwanese, not Japanese.
Fighting the Japanese in China was Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, head of the ruling Nationalist Party. Chiang, an austere and autocratic leader, ran a government that never controlled all of China and was grossly corrupt and inefficient. But he was still considered one of the Allies' Big Four leaders. At the 1943 Cairo Conference, when Chiang laid claim to Taiwan in the post-war world, the others simply agreed. August 1945. With the end of World War II came the end of Taiwan's 50-year separation from China.
We
were happy that Taiwan was going back to its mother country. We hoped things would get better. We didn't expect the situation to develop as it did. It was totally unexpected.
As the Japanese packed up and left, China and Japan signed an agreement returning Taiwan to China. For a brief historic moment, the Chinese and the Taiwanese were united in their vision of Taiwan as part of China. What happened next would divide them again.
My father was the chairman of the Welcome Committee of Chinese Army landed to Kaohsiung. Then the Chinese ship opened and started coming down from the ship. People, what they saw is not the army, they're just beggar, with all these things and disorganized. And when they landed, there's total undisciplined group of the people.
They wore padded clothes and carried pots and umbrellas. Some didn't have shoes, and others wore straw sandals. We called them blanket soldiers.
To the arriving Chinese, Taiwan looked like enemy territory. The Taiwanese wore kimonos, spoke Japanese, and had fought for Japan, the nation that ravaged China for more than a decade. The Chinese brought with them some of the worst excesses and corruption of the nationalist regime. Chiang Kai-shek's Governor-General in Taiwan was instructed to strip the island to support Chiang's fight against the communists.
The Japanese stored lots of food in Taiwan during World War II. Instead of distributing those supplies to the hungry Taiwanese, Chiang's governor shipped them to Shanghai and sold them. If he cared about Taiwan, he would never have done this.
They described the Japanese departure and the Chinese arrival as the dog leaves, but the pig comes.
Disillusionment, resentment, and hunger. The frustration mounted like steam in a tea kettle, ready to blow off the lid. In early 1947, the lid blew.
The evening of February 27th, there was an old woman selling cigarettes illegally. She was caught by a policeman, and he took her cigarettes and also her cash. The old woman would not let go of him, so this policeman hit her on the head with a handgun. The crowd became angry. When the policeman saw the crowd coming, he started shooting, and he shot a pedestrian dead. What happened in Taipei quickly spread to the whole province, so it is called the February 28th incident. Local leaders came to negotiate with the government. The governor thought this was a rebellion, so he asked Chiang Kai-shek to send help. On March 8th, Chiang sent troops to Taiwan. After they landed in Keelung, they shot all the way into the city of Taipei. There they declared martial law.
My husband was a bicycle repairman. On that day, he heard the declaration of martial law, but he still opened the shop. His landlord told him to go home so that his family wouldn't worry, because there was gunfire all over the place. Soon after he got home, the blanket soldiers arrived. They broke into our house and robbed us and smashed all our belongings.
I sat with my father on the straw mat. They searched everywhere in the house, making a big mess. Then they dragged my father out. We kids were all scared and crying. My mother was crying and begging them, but it didn't help.
They just ignored us and shot my husband. 2 gunshots right through his heart. After about an hour, my husband died.
Chiang's troops killed an estimated 10,000 people. Members of the negotiating committees, innocent bystanders. Many in the Taiwanese elite. The killings effectively decapitated any leadership for future opposition to the Nationalists.
The evidence shows the troops shot everyone, man or woman, old or young. This was intentional terrorism.
Mention of the February 28th incident was harshly suppressed. But the memory would sustain the Taiwanese resentment of mainlanders for decades.
Blame? Yes, I blame the mainlanders. I don't even like to talk to them. I met people who said if their daughter married a mainlander, they'd chop her up to feed the pigs.
In China, Chiang Kai-shek and his government were facing more immediate problems. Their fight against the communists went from bad to worse. And by late 1948, the tide of people fleeing the mainland turned into a flood.
The Shanghai chapter 到台湾来
We withdrew from Shanghai by boat, but we didn't know we were headed for Taiwan. Only after we arrived and exited the ship did we realize it was Taiwan.
2 million refugees poured into Taiwan, swelling the island's population by 1/3. Many were soldiers in Chiang's army. Angry, humiliated, missing the families they had been forced to abandon, they expected to stay on Taiwan only until they could reconquer the mainland.
Our president Chiang Kai-shek told us, prepare in the first year, counterattack in the second. Within 5 years, we'll succeed. We were all determined to fight back home.
The island had become all that was left of the Republic of China, and Chiang Kai-shek would dominate it as never before. He had already prepared by sending to Taiwan case after case filled with art treasures from the National Palace in Beijing and the entire gold reserves of the Chinese government.
In any country, if the top leader loses all the territory, as much as 10 million square kilometers, if he loses all the population, 600 or 700 million people, abandoning them to the wicked devil, he should be tried, or at least he should leave politics. But he did not. Instead, he was said to be even wiser.
On October 1st, 1949, in Beijing, Mao Zedong proclaimed the communist victory. Many believed Mao's troops would soon take Taiwan too. The next week in Taipei, Chiang Kai-shek's forces also put on a display of military strength and independence. Now there were 2 Chinas on the world stage, the Republic of China on Taiwan and the People's Republic of China on the mainland, each claiming to be the sole legitimate government of the country.
Resolute in spirit and confident that man's inherent love of freedom and justice will emerge victorious, our forces will fight on. History records with devastating truth that right will prevail. China will remain free.
Chiang's troops were cornered, their backs against the Pacific Ocean, with no support from the great powers in the West. They were saved by something totally unexpected, the start of the Korean War. In a world divided into communist and anti-communist camps, suddenly the survival of Chiang Kai-shek's Free China seemed critical to American strategic interests. The Truman administration sent the U.S. Navy into the Taiwan Strait. Over the next 15 years, America would also send Taiwan more than $4 billion in aid.
美元的时代，我还很小，那个时候的美元，我们感觉得到的是什么？是
I was very young during the period of American aid.
我们感觉到的有
To us, American aid meant milk, flour, flour sacks, and especially the pants that were made from the flour sacks.
这个做这个裤子穿。
Using American aid and advice, Chiang's government began to reshape Taiwan with a major land reform program, forcing owners to give up property in return for shares in government industries. The program laid a strong foundation for economic growth and brought the Nationalists popular support.
I felt really happy when I got the land because I'm a farmer and the land was now my own.
But to many Taiwanese, the mainlanders felt like another occupying army. Like the Japanese, they imposed their own interpretation of history.
The courses emphasized education in Mandarin and in Chinese history and geography. The Chinese history emphasized that since ancient times, Taiwan was part of the sacred territory of China. They claimed that as far back as the Three Kingdoms era, China had already sent troops to Taiwan.
The teacher drew a map and told us that China and Taiwan were one piece of land 2 million years ago. Blood is thicker than water, they said. This was how history was taught. The trip to school was conducted like a military drill. We lined up and marched in. At the doorway, 2 people stood like military guards at an army barrack. It was not until I entered the military that I found this situation again. The teacher's methods were exactly the same as the drilling in the military.
Everyone was enlisted to support the government's fight back to the mainland. It was a full-fledged campaign aimed at creating a society that would support Chiang Kai-shek's anti-communist crusade.
There were some patriotic songs then, like Fight Back to the Mainland. This type of patriotic song was a force-feeding method of education. We were young and did not even know where we were supposed to fight back to.
Today, we celebrate the 42nd National Day. My fellow countrymen, I encourage you. Hurry, fight back to mainland China. Destroy the communists.
As he trained his troops, Zhang was also engaged in a propaganda war. Balloons with food and medicine and leaflets attached were floated over to the mainland when the winds were favorable. In Taipei, the Nationalists set up all the branches of China's government. The increasingly elderly representatives gathered year after year, holding images of their mainland provinces to prove that the government on Taiwan represented all of China. They had been elected in China once in 1947 and would not be replaced, Zhang insisted, until all of China was free again. The image of free China was a key part of Zhang's fight for world support, especially for American support. It paid off in 1954 when China shelled Quemoy and Matsu, 2 small islands near the mainland but held by Taiwan. As both sides prepared for war, America even considered using nuclear weapons to stop China.
It is true that we want peace and that we and that we do want it ardently. However, we do not want it at the price of our security or of our honor. Indeed, experience shows that those who try in that way to buy peace, in fact, only increase the ultimate danger of war.
America became even more committed to Chiang Kai-shek's vision of the Nationalists as the real China. The two governments signed a treaty which bound America to defend the island. Chiang Kai-shek repaid the U.S. with some of the most unyielding rhetoric of the Cold War.
What is the attitude of the Chinese government toward the ceasefire proposal? This is obviously a continuation of the Russian imperialists' aggression in China, with the Chinese communists as the agents and an extension of the Korean and the Indo-Chinese wars.
Chiang recognized the fragility of his position and organized one of the largest standing armies in the region. Skillfully employing America's aid, his government began to build up Taiwan's industries, helping the island start its remarkable rise to international economic power. The Nationalist Party was reformed, reducing corruption and inviting Taiwanese participation in local elections. But in some essential ways, Chiang Kai-shek remained unchanged.
Basically, Chiang Kai-shek resembled an emperor of ancient China or of Japan. He seemed to think that, like an emperor, he had to keep aloof to sustain his authority and dignity. He was very detached from the people and the real world. For example, he knew nothing about prices. I've heard stories such as, once his grandson wanted a pair of leather shoes. Chiang gave him 5 Taiwan dollars, about 20 cents back then. His grandson knew this was not enough, but Chiang said that things were cheap in Taiwan, and his grandson could do nothing about it.
People also compared Chiang Kai-shek to an emperor because he seemed to be setting up a dynasty. His oldest son and closest advisor, Chiang Jing-kuo, was being groomed to be his successor. When Chiang Jing-kuo was only 15, his father sent him to study at Sun Yat-sen University in Moscow. Relations between Stalin and Chiang Kai-shek soured, and Chiang Jing-kuo was trapped in the Soviet Union. He spent 12 years working in a power plant in the remote Urals, and he married a Russian woman. By the time he and his family were finally allowed to return to China, he had become a very different person from his father.
The old president was straightforward. Mr. Chiang Jing-kuo was just the opposite. He was very reserved and not expressive. When he said something, it was impossible to guess from his face how he felt.
The public face of Chiang Jing-kuo showed a man who connected with people as his father never did. But Chiang Jing-kuo had another side. He was also the head of the Nationalist, huge repressive security apparatus. It was used to crush any challenge to Chiang Kai-shek's power.
When I was in primary school, my mother told me that my father died in the February 28th incident. She warned me not to say anything outside the house or I would be arrested. I understood that there were spies everywhere. They reported you. If you criticized the government, you would be arrested and taken from your house secretly. You were just disappeared. Some were sent to Green Island prison, some went to jail, and others went to who knows where. I didn't say anything. I was afraid I would disappear.
So many people arrested, and teacher too, professor too, disappeared. And the terror, this really terror. And no one knows when someone would knock the door. Anytime, midnight, anytime, they come even without warrant.
The policy that the nationalists used to rule Taiwan was not a policy of murder. It was a policy of deterrence. Kill one, warn 100. With this deterrence, the nationalists survived a long time under relatively peaceful circumstances.
It was not until the 1960s that a few individuals began to criticize Chiang's regime openly.
1964, it is 15 years after this government went into exile in Taiwan. And communist regime in Peking is quite well established, control whole China. So I thought we should point it out what's wrong with the whole situation. It is impossible for this government to go back to China, to retake China. Secondly, we said one China, one Taiwan are already established fact. We have to accept this fact that this government is going to stay as the government of Taiwan instead of China.
Pang Ming-min and two colleagues were preparing a manifesto when the secret police burst into their room and arrested them.
I was treated well, to be fair to them, and I was sentenced to 8 years. That is very light. Usually this kind of crime is death.
Every writer had a police headquarters in his mind under martial law. Police really ran things, and everyone had a little police headquarters inside himself. You would think, this phrase I wrote, will they approve?
One of Bo Yang's jobs at the newspaper was translating the comics into Chinese.
Popeye and his son were in exile on an island, and they were campaigning for election there. Popeye gave a speech, and he used an English word, fellows. There could be hundreds of translations for fellows, but I chose one which was, all my fellow countrymen. This was terrible. The Bureau of Investigation arrested me, saying, why didn't you translate it into something else? This is exactly the way our President Chiang speaks. You are making fun of him. It's on an island, and it's a father and his son. This attacks our national leadership. It deserves the death penalty, no doubt the death penalty.
After months of beatings and a closed military trial, Bo Yang was sent to the isolated Green Island prison for undermining the affections between the people and the government.
During my 10 years in prison, I had time to examine all my past experiences. I felt that our entire Chinese culture of 5,000 years was sick. Our culture had begun to stagnate, like a river that no longer runs. It had become a dead pond of water, rotting, losing its air, producing vapors, beginning to stink. It was like a vat of fermenting soy sauce, or like a sticky, sticky jar of something more terrible than glue.
Some people now say that there must have been unjust cases. The name white terror is used. But if you look at it from the viewpoint of government, the situation was quite different from now. Mao Zedong was threatening to overrun Taiwan and to force Taiwan under communist rule.
In Mao Zedong's China, this was the period of the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, with its threatening images of rampaging destruction and calls for liberating Taiwan.
The Cultural Revolution burned down everything that was considered traditional. Another puppet master told me that during the Cultural Revolution, several puppet troops in Guangzhou were forced to pour gasoline on the puppets and burn them all. The senior masters had spent all their lives with those puppets and had nothing to do with politics. They ended with everything burnt up and nothing to pass on to the next generation. They were so upset that they got sick and died. Puppet theater in Taiwan is better than in mainland China because they had the Cultural Revolution and we had cultural rejuvenation.
The Republic of China's policies were carefully calibrated. On Taiwan, Chiang's government maintained its repressive police state, while on the world stage it promoted itself as a stronghold of freedom and the real China. In the 1960s, Taiwan began losing ground.
It's a matter of survival for us. In order to survive, we must have countries that recognize us. We cannot afford to be a country which is not recognized by anybody.
A number of nations, including France, Canada, and Italy, broke relations with Taipei and recognized Beijing. But as long as the U.S. supported them, Chiang's government could feel secure.
There can be no stable and enduring peace without the participation of the People's Republic of China and its 750 million people. That is why I have undertaken initiatives in several areas to open the door for more normal relations between our two countries.
The staunch anti-communists who had supported Chiang Kai-shek for decades were appalled. Although the U.S. still maintained diplomatic relations with the Republic of China on Taiwan, Nixon's speech was a signal that the U.S. was moving towards Beijing. It also meant that America could no longer prevent the communists from taking the China seat at the United Nations.
In view of the frenzy and the irrational manners that have been exhibited in this hall, the delegation of the Republic of China has now decided not to take part to any further proceedings of this General Assembly.
Rather than be expelled, Taiwan's delegation withdrew.
Our policy was to affirm representation for Peking, and that part of the policy worked out. I think that the damage is more one of principle, a deeply held conviction that the UN would be ill-served by, one, expelling this government, and two, setting the precedent for expulsion itself. But I think I think all would concede, friend of or foe alike, that the UN once Peking gets here, will be a more realistic forum. But the price tag was pretty high. The price tag of expulsion is what troubles me.
On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, I hereby reiterate that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory, and the U.S. armed invasion and occupation of China's Taiwan and the Taiwan Straits cannot, in the least, alter the sovereignty of the People's Republic of China over Taiwan.
Don't tell me that the world is in peace now. With the communists over there, there will be no peace. You will see there will be more trouble in future.
What kind of trouble do you think is possible?
Well, remember Munich? When Chamberlain? Well, that's a story would tell the whole thing.
民国60年，这个台湾呢，从联合国撤退出来以后，
Taiwan's government faced a very serious issue when they left the UN.
他是说我唯一的。
Before, the Nationalist Party could say, Taiwan is the only legal government of China, and we are the government party. After Taiwan was forced out of the UN, the Republic of China lost its international status. The Nationalist Party had to explain this to Taiwan's 16 million people.
After we defeat Mao, the Republic of China can be reunited. This is our goal, and this is the only way we can protect security in Asia and maintain world peace.
Increasingly, the voice of the Nationalist Party was Chiang Kai-shek's son, Chiang Ching-kuo. Since 1972, Chiang Kai-shek, the only president of the Republic of China that most people could remember, had been ill and was rarely seen in public.
Once, as the doctor was trying to bring him out of a coma, he began talking. I heard him say over and over again that he wanted to fight back and save the people on the mainland. Fight back to China and rescue our compatriots, he said.
On April 5th, 1975, Chiang Kai-shek died. Chiang had been America's ally in Asia in World War II. After his defeat in China, he had emerged as a hero of the Cold War. Forced onto Taiwan, he had ruthlessly crushed all opposition, but he also revitalized the island's economy and gave its people a stake in their future. But the world had become less concerned about Chiang and Taiwan. President Ford planned to send his Secretary of Agriculture to the funeral. The Republic of China was so insulted that he sent Vice President Rockefeller instead. It was a dreary epilogue to a life lived large, marking the end of an era and the start of a new one.
The Nationalist Party was still the only ruling power. Taiwan was still under martial law. I knew there were many risks ahead. But I thought this was also an opportunity to push for democracy in Taiwan.
A small opposition movement began to grow in Taiwan. Forbidden under martial law from organizing politically, they called themselves the Dongwai, people outside the ruling party. And they began running for local offices.
We knew it was risky because the Nationalists wouldn't let us form our own party. But we were encouraged by the public support. We felt it gave us an advantage. the way the weaker side can have advantages in a wrestling match.
In this new era, the Taiwanese began exploring their island's unique identity. Like the mainlanders, they saw themselves as Chinese, but with a local flavor that mixed in Japanese and Aboriginal influences. A new literary genre started, homeland literature, celebrating the texture and meaning of ordinary Taiwanese life.
A frightful din of drums and gongs suddenly rose at the temple gate, catching people off guard. The commotion mounted. It spread like the fishy smell brought each morning by the first boat, rising in the sun's warmth, until it permeated every corner of the village. Firecrackers burst forth amid the deafening drums. Seated in her chair, Matsu gazed down. Smoke drifted upward. Ah, Matsu. Merciful goddess of the sea, protect us.
I had barely seen any literature that really described the life and people of this land. When I first read the homeland literature, it reminded me of the intimate parts of my life. It shared the same experiences we had, and this is deeply meaningful.
With Chiang Kai-shek gone and its international position undermined, the Nationalist Party also faced a new era. They needed a new source of support. Some predicted that the isolated government of Chiang Kai-shek would have to turn to Beijing. Instead, they turned cautiously to the people of Taiwan.
I
remember that President Chiang Kai-shek was very kind to the people and absolutely sincere about it. I have a photo of me and the president's chief secretary eating pineapple and watermelon with him. I knew that he had diabetes and this type of sweet fruit was not good for him. Once I said directly to him, "Mr. President, is it all right for you to eat watermelon?" He said that the people meant well and he had medicine to control it. He was just himself and acted very naturally.
Chiang Kai-shek's Taiwanization was a way of repackaging himself. It was a way of re-establishing his legitimacy. Looking back, Taiwanization was the road he had to take. Otherwise, how could the head of the secret police rise to the top? He had to pass through a bleaching process. This was the only way he could maintain his domestic legitimacy. He had to move away from the black role of secret agent boss and take on a white role.
Then, in January 1979, the United States completed what it began with Nixon's trip to China. America withdrew recognition of the Republic of China on Taiwan and transferred its embassy to the People's Republic of China in Beijing. The treaty that obliged America to defend the island was canceled.
The U.S. decision to recognize mainland China and to de-recognize the Republic of China came as a shock to us. We asked them, how are they going to treat us with regard to our safety? There's no safety of our people, safety of our property, safety of all the deposits we have. There's no consideration.
Zhang Jingguo's government scrambled to arrange a new relationship. It had to settle for security guarantees without official recognition. In this time of uncertainty, it began to see the opposition as increasingly dangerous. In December 1979, a group of activists planned a march in Kaohsiung, the major southern port city, in honor of International Human Rights Day. Few were worried. The group's lawyer, Lin Yisheng, wasn't even in town.
This was just the usual kind of demonstration to show our ideals. I didn't think it was important, and initially I didn't plan to participate.
We were a peaceful protest. We used torches as the symbol of hope and our long struggle for democracy. We kept them constantly burning as we walked in the front of the group.
We walked for less than 100 meters, and we saw from another direction that armored anti-terrorist vehicles were spraying white vapor. There was a smell of gas. I was in the front. I saw that people were already retreating, and it was getting confused.
By the time we got to Kaohsiung, it was already a mess. The police were trying to disperse the crowd.
Turned into a police riot. A few days later, the arrests began.
Someone jumped over the fence and broke through the window and asked who I was. I said I was Lin Yisheng, and he said I was under arrest.
At 5 a.m., they rang the doorbell and arrested me. But when the agents from the Investigation Bureau arrested attorney Lin Yisheng, I thought it was over. If they arrested innocent people like Lin Yisheng, I could see that they planned to eliminate all democracy advocates and activities against the Nationalist Party.
I kept a diary while I was in prison, and I still have it. In it, I wrote, mostly they used terror and beating, both at the same time, to weaken your mind. They said, if you don't talk, we will beat you and beat you until you die. We will say you committed suicide because you were guilty. Sometimes they said, we will keep beating you until you confess you are a communist. On February 28th, I suddenly heard my name called. They said that I had a friend, maybe my lawyer, waiting to take me home. That evening, a friend told me that my mother had been killed. On the second day, my friend told me that 2 of my daughters had also been killed. And my oldest daughter was in emergency care at the hospital.
It's really beyond belief that his mother and daughters were killed while his home was surrounded and watched by intelligence agents. Lini Sheng had harshly criticized the Nationalist Party. I felt that they chose to assassinate his mother and daughters and to kill them on February 28th as a lesson to the public.
I wondered what meaning there was in life and how I would be able to continue living in a society like this. I can't describe the pain I felt at that time.
I only found out in the newspaper about the murders of Mr. Lini Sheng's mother and children. Now you ask me about the actual facts of this case. I have no way of answering. This case happened almost 20 years ago and has still not been solved. So I have no way of knowing the actual facts.
Shortly after the murders, the trial of the Kaohsiung activists began.
The tragic deaths in the Lin family were a horrendous shock to society. The Nationalists had to open the trial to the public. And people could really see that the Nationalists would use violence to crush anyone who criticized the regime.
8 of the activists, including Lini Sheng and Chou, received sentences of 12 years to life in prison. Another 33 people, including Wang Toa, were sentenced to terms of up to 6 years. Once again, the Nationalists had shut down the Taiwanese opposition.
President Chiang Kai-shek asked me how we should handle the situation. I told him that both as a country and as a political party, we must foster talent the same as if we were planting a tree. Take care of it from the beginning as a seedling and through years and years. Only then would it be able to mature. To destroy it would also be very simple. 3 or 4 blows with an axe would topple it.
Other events began pressuring Zhang Jingguo. A series of scandals at home and abroad linked high-ranking Nationalist Party members with corruption and implicated Zhang Jingguo's secret police in a murder in America. Even the government's successes created problems. As Taiwan had become isolated diplomatically, it turned to economics to bolster its international presence. Its policies produced Taiwan's dazzling economic miracle. The island was hailed as one of the 4 mini-dragons of Southeast Asia. People's incomes doubled and doubled again. Out of the economic strength came new voices for change.
A lot of people, including some elected officials, began participating in democratization activities all around Taiwan. We had small demonstrations almost everywhere. Under martial law, this was risky.
Hundreds of local protests began to spring up. 500 people marched for environmental protection in one town. In Taipei, demonstrators held a 30-minute vigil. All of the protests were illegal under martial law.
What looked like something insignificant was actually a break in the martial law system. We broke through the White Terror and the mood that pervaded society after the Kaohsiung incident. It was important as a first step, and not because of how many people were involved or how long the road was.
The protests were yet another pressure on Zhang Jingguo, and there began to be signs that he was considering abandoning martial law. This galvanized the activists, who decided the time had come, finally, openly, to form an opposition political party.
When we arrived at the Grand Hotel, we forced ourselves to smile. Actually, we felt pretty nervous in our hearts. Intelligence agents and plainclothesmen were all over the place, watching us. None of them knew that we were going to found a new party that day. We had prepared ourselves to take any risks.
We did not think about martial law, although we were prepared to be arrested. If our first group was arrested, our second and third groups would come right after. We were determined to succeed.
Now, President Zhang Jingguo indicated that he too was ready for change. In an interview with Katharine Graham of The Washington Post, he surprised everyone by announcing that the new Democratic Progressive Party would be permitted, and other restrictions would soon be lifted.
Those demonstrations had a direct relationship with the ending of martial law. It made the government understand that continuing martial law would have limited effects. People didn't support it and didn't fear it.
By the time Zhang Jingguo lifted the restrictions in July 1987, martial law had been in place for almost 40 years, since the arrival of the Nationalists in 1949.
1988年1月1号 开放人民可以主党
On January 1st, 1988, he also agreed to cancel the limitation on new political parties and on newspapers. These measures were based on his belief in democracy.
这就是在他手上决定了很多的政策。
Unfortunately, he passed away on January 13th.
1月13号，他就去世了。
I believe that he would have announced more democratic reforms in the following year.
The new leader was Li Dongwei. Li was an agronomist, selected by Jiang Jingguo as vice president only 4 years before. For the first time in its history, Taiwan was headed by a Taiwanese.
李登辉当总统这件事情，让台湾人的另外一个鼓舞就是。
Li Dongwei's presidency made the Taiwanese people dance for joy. Taiwan finally had a president whose name wasn't Zhang. Before this, no Taiwanese ever thought he could be president. After Li Dongwei took office, people started saying, anyone can be president.
As Li Dongwei came into office, the pace of democratic change in Taiwan accelerated. Some of the most emotional moments came with the lifting of restrictions on travel to China. For the first time in 40 years, mainlanders who had crossed the Taiwan Strait with Chiang Kai-shek could return to visit their families and villages.
The first 2 times I went back home, I brought a lot of money, and they treated me well. Afterward, I did not bring much money, and they didn't treat me as nicely. It was lonely. Other people raised my children, and we were not close.
When my sister saw me, she called me, "You counter-revolutionary." My own daughters didn't want to deal with me. But after a couple of days, they called me Daddy and treated me well. After all, blood is thicker than water. When we walked, they would hold my hand.
Thousands of people were reunited across miles and decades. But many of the mainlanders living in Taiwan had to face the sad realization that they had become too different to return to the China they'd missed for so long. In Taiwan, democratic movements began to sweep the island. There were student sit-ins, railroad strikes, farmers' protests, and other confrontations. The activism pushed into the open the questions no one had dared raise for so long. Was Taiwan still a province of China, or had it become a separate nation? Did Taiwan still need a government that was set up to rule the mainland? The same elderly representatives, elected 40 years before in China, still ruled Taiwan's government. Now the opposition demanded that they resign.
There was nothing we could do. We could only scold these people. You old thieves. This comes from a traditional Confucian book which says, old yet not dead, such is the thief. They were old, not dead, and up to no good, so we called them thieves.
This is unconstitutional. The Democratic Progressive Party claims that it supports the Constitution. Tell me, where in the Constitution does it say that we have to retire?
Finally, frustration turned to violence.
They rushed to the podium, broke the microphone, and threw things. I must say, I'm worried.
We had no choice. The Nationalists weren't elected and didn't represent our people. We had to show how irrational this was.
Under this pressure, the Nationalist Party made a startling change in a major policy. It no longer claimed to be the only legitimate government of China, but rather to be one of two equal governments, each representing part of China's territory.
We are still for reunification, but now there is big gap between the standard of freedom and democratization and as well as the prosperity between the two sides. We hope with the coming of time, this gap could be narrowed.
Not surprisingly, Beijing saw Taipei's new position as a move towards separatism and reacted strongly.
Recently, some people on the island have advocated Taiwan independence. They want to separate Taiwan from its motherland. All the Chinese people strongly oppose this. The Chinese government won't let this happen.
To pull the Taiwanese back from this separatism, China began to dangle the lure of its vast markets. Taiwan's businesses were encouraged to invest billions in the mainland's modernization. Taiwan's government realized that economics now hooked them more closely to China than ever before.
在利害上讲，台湾要独立、孤立起来，同大陆切断。
If we were to go independent, isolate ourselves, and cut off the relationship with mainland China, our economic development would be affected. So would the 21 million people who live on this island. It would be very difficult.
The reality is Taiwan has been independent since 1949 from China. They are not ruled by China, in that sense independent. Why don't accept this reality?
In 1996, when Taiwan held its presidential election, independence became a key part of the campaign debate.
My election would show that we are an independent sovereign nation. I would not need to declare independence, because the whole world knows where I stand.
Democracy now became dangerous, as China decided the open talk of independence could not be ignored. It began moving 150,000 troops to a coastal area near Taiwan, redeploying aircraft and amphibious landers. To be sure Taiwan's voters understood the message, Beijing announced it would begin a series of missile tests just off Taiwan's shores. the 50-year stalemate in the Taiwan Strait seemed close to the breaking point.
Lee Dong-wei is not pro-Taiwan independence and not a communist. I am the most loyal supporter and booster of the Republic of China.
As had happened so often in Taiwan's past, an outside power tipped the balance. Although the U.S. and Taiwan no longer had a mutual defense treaty or even diplomatic relations, America sent 2 carrier groups to prevent further escalation. The crisis cooled down, although Taiwan and China were no closer.
我们已经多次强调，台湾问题纯属中国的内政。
Taiwan is China's territory. It is not a U.S.
台湾
protectorate.
是中国的神圣领土，
The U.S. is trampling on the Chinese people's feelings for their nation.
中国人民的民族感情。
U.S. attempts at preventing reunification are doomed to failure.
实现祖国统一的民族愿望，这是注定要失败的。
My country is very clear in that we do not want to be provocative. We do not want to cause any trouble for anybody else. And then there is the other side, the mainland of China. I hope and pray they will see their role clear.
When the votes were counted, President Lee Dong-wei had won re-election by a large margin. The Taiwanese seemed to be voting for what they already had, a kind of independence that would not provoke China further. So the elections left the key question murky. Is Taiwan part of China or not? The ambiguity permeates everything in Taiwan today, even religious life. At the annual celebration of the goddess Matsu's birthday, people argued over whether Matsu should be venerated as a link to China, or whether the many miracles she had performed for her Taiwanese followers made her truly Taiwanese.
If global peace and Asian prosperity mean ignoring our 20 million people's desires and ignoring Taiwan's history, then we Taiwanese could not care less about this kind of peace.
Ultimately, Taiwan's fate may once again be controlled by other nations. If China invades, will the U.S. send troops to die in defense of Taiwan? Will the next conflict force a choice between Taiwan's democratic aspirations and the larger question of peace in Asia?
It is a choice of values. Peace. What exactly is peace? If we have to sacrifice the hopes and freedom of the Taiwanese so that China will not declare war, I don't see any value to this kind of peace.
For the Taiwanese who have worked so hard for democracy and prosperity, the future is as uncertain as ever. Like Matsu's sailors, they live in peril, knowing that the next crisis will come, but unable to predict what it will mean to their long contested island.